Today, I'm happy to be here with Dan Brown, author of Movies, Why We Love Them, and How They Changed Us 2020. Welcome, Dan. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Right. Um, could you please tell us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in film as a subject for your book?
Well, strangely enough, my formal background has nothing to do with film or the arts. I I I went through school, of course, college and so forth in San Jose, and then I landed a job. Basically, I needed money. So I landed a job in the public sector in the field of public transportation. I just stuck with that for I guess it's 40 years. So because it because I was just doing a workaday job, blue collar job, I kept my mind occupied with other things. And I've always had a keen interest in film. Um, I used to go to the movies a lot with my mom and sometimes with my dad, and so it was always in my blood. And also, had an ongoing interest in performing arts. I've never been professional in any of those fields, but I've always loved film and music and stuff like that. So I loved watching movies, and my approach was always I was always keen about the process of making film, and not just from an entertainment standpoint, but from the artistic standpoint. The collaborative nature of it and all the different elements that went into it, like designing and writing. And I like to consider myself a writer, although I haven't really done any published work until this book. But all those things were of particular interest to me. All the components that make a successful film. So I've always looked at film from a critical standpoint, like that. Ever since I was the adult.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's fantastic. In chapter, broke the questions down by chapter. So in chapter one, you have a quote, and basically the end of the quote is, "Put another way, movies and television are a powerful drug." And on that question, I'd like to say, since cinema taps into a powerful human need and Hollywood is not making documentaries, could this affect how history is generally understood? Then the man who shot Liberty Valance, or were they printing the myth?
Yeah, I think that people tend to be influenced by their popular entertainment, and the the storytelling aspect of it. People in general kind of latch onto that. I'm reminded of like some dramatic films, non-documentary films that I think have had an influence in the culture, such as oh, the, the films that made Sidney Poitier a star, like In the Heat of the Night, Yes,
Okay.
Coming to Dinner. I think I have nothing statistically to prove that, but I think that through the entertainment of those movies and the acting and so forth, I think it probably helped change the perception of the general population of the white population
Right.
towards
Yeah,
African Americans.
that's good. We're going to talk
That's
about that
just
a
one
little,
example.
yeah, a little more later. But I guess I was in this instance, I was talking about maybe like historical films like Custer and how we conflate maybe Little Big Man or something like that as the true history of Custer's
Oh,
battlefield.
right. Okay. Yeah, that's a hard thing to gauge. But I think that, well, let's put it this way: historical films that have a powerful look, like Dustin Hoffman and Big Man, and I think one of my all time favorite movies is Born for Baby, and
Right.
just the majestic scope and sweep of that movie, draws you in and sort of, you know, the duration of the movie, you're living in that environment, and it creates a sort of a mystique about that whole time in history and that whole culture. You know, and I
Right.
think I'm not sure why movies or even television, for that matter, are influential in that way, but it seems like people sit down and are entertained and are invited into a story, and they can uh, they can live out the story through the people telling the story. I think that's kind of a learning tool. I
Right.
may not, even though movies, historical movies, may not be keenly accurate in every aspect. I think that come, majority of people come away at least with a an elevated general sense of history. You know, they might even be inspired to learn more. But
Read more.
you know, even,
Okay.
the general people, in general, people take those things at face value. If it's for them and it says it's a true story, they
Right.
tend to believe that story as it's told without necessarily, you know,
Looking up.
looking at it from a critical standpoint.
Yes, this is based on a true story. There were humans that lived here,
Right,
so it's based
right.
on.
Well, yeah, most people don't need much to. If the story is interesting and it says it's true, then by God, it's true.
Yeah.
To
All
the
right.
extent that carries any value, I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah. Get them interested. At least they know World War II happened or something.
Well, right, right, exactly. Excuse me. Then I have a chronic sinusitis that I have to deal with.
I've been having the devil with it today myself here. It's a bad day. All right. Let's see. You said in chapter 2, I pulled out the quote off of page 22. I submit that the primary difference that distinguishes today's secular cultures from older mythological based cultures is the deification, and it's a subconscious response more than a conscious one. In terms of the above quote, do you think people find heroes among actors, movie characters, the movies themselves, or all of above?
Oh, absolutely, all of the above. I mean, I think it's primarily through identifying with a particular persona in a film. I think I think we all, to one degree or another, fantasize about a heroic aspect to ourselves, and if we see somebody, acting out uh, um, something of value that we carry, deep in our souls, it helps us to sort of find the hero in ourselves.
Okay.
It's like, gee, that's I wish I were that,
You're trying to live it. And
and,
that,
I,
so
and that's a pretty powerful attraction. I think that all of us like to think that we're capable of heroic things, and would like to think that we brought out the best in ourselves in a crisis situation. And so I think uh, as human beings, we kind of live vicariously through the heroes on the screen.
emulate them a little bit. Okay. Um, okay. This is based on a quote in the book, and I'm just going to ask you straight out: Star Wars or Star Trek, and why?
You know, uh, that's actually kind of like apples and oranges to me, because Star Wars is the fairy tale. I think we have a hunger for fairy tales in our secular world, um, and because it involves things like technologies, things like that we're familiar with today. It's like planting traditional fairy tales into a highly technological setting, and I think that's the draw. Star Trek, on the other hand, I think is a genuine moral fable. I think there's a genuine effort on the makers of Star Trek to ask deep questions about human existence and everything about what it is to be human, intellectually, spiritually, etc. And I think that my attraction to Star Trek, as, is in that vein, where we're required to think or rethink our view of the world.
Good of the many outweigh the good of the few, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so we've learned a lot of lessons from Star
yeah,
Trek.
yeah. There's a little phrases that pop up in Star Trek now, and they're almost like Aesop's fables, that moral at the end is, oh yeah, okay, that's what that means.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I have a couple questions related to Chapter 3. Could you look at significant events in U.S. history, such as the Great Depression, World War II, 9/11, and how they changed the movie industry? Or they changed the movie?
Yeah, I've given some thought to that. It's a little hard to capsulize that cause-effect relationship, but I think that when the society goes through a major change like that, the movie industry picks up on that and tries to create stories that are reflective of it. And that usually comes, it's kind of a wave effect. It comes out in movies after we've gone through that, like movies about the Great Depression. You didn't really find movies that were dealing with that issue while it was happening. It was kind of like after the fact. I made some notes here, trying to think of specific examples.
I was thinking, like how we came out of the Great Depression and went, well, World War One, Great Depression, and right into World War II, and that kind
Right.
of launched the whole film noir movement. That the
Right.
French
Well,
picked
a
up
good
on.
example is yeah, maybe like the Grapes of Wrath with Henry Ford. That was basically post Great Depression, but was trying to tell a relatable story about the suffering average people went through, and the perseverance of the human spirit. And that would be a keen example. And then post World War II movies, there's a lot of movies in the 50s that emphasized heroism, or
Right.
because we United States as a culture, we emerged from World War victorious and sort of proud, and I think a lot of motion picture industry fictionalize those values. Like I'm thinking of I'm drawing a blank here, but there was one movie in particular with yeah, probably sorry about that.
Sorry.
Probably on a kind of an odd place where I'm in my COVID amnesia state.
I understand. It's like maybe like From Here to Eternity and stuff like that.
Yeah. There's a good one, and 12 o'clock high.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, right.
Fantastic.
There's another one. Yeah. So we like I say, there seems to be kind of a lag. A lot of times movies are a look back to this thing that we've just gone through, because it takes a certain amount of time for somebody to build those stories, and I think it's people are more receptive to something that's not they're not currently in. They're less critical through the filter of a dramatic story on film.
It kind of reminds me, like historians, they have to get about 50 years away from something before
Right.
they
Yeah.
realize
And of
it.
course, perception changes. And like when we emerged from the Great Depression and we went right from that into World War II, and then so when we got to the 50s, we'd seen quite a lot of turmoil, and we were sort of feeling our oats at that time, saying, well, we made it through that. By gosh, there's a lot of patriotic, pro-America type films
Uh-huh.
that emphasize conquering adversity, but we had to actually get through it first, and there was a sort of a nostalgic aspect to these that talked about things like that.
Right. Okay. Um, yeah, I guess I'm making an assumption here. I know that the movies really came into their own in the late 20s and 30s and became a
Right, right.
consumer thing. And I was kind of curious why, if you had any thoughts about why those Universal monster movies were so popular so early
Oh,
on.
yeah. That's kind of a curious phenomenon. I think that, well, first of all, it was. I think people have always had an interest in the fringe, experience, like the bizarre, the nightmarish, and thing. And by putting our nightmares up in front of us
Yeah.
on the screen and having us conquer our nightmares like through those characters, I that was like it was something that people were hugely interested in. Like, it helped help people visualize, in a way that
Uh-huh.
was reflecting back on whatever their own nightmares were. There's something about a visualization right there in front of you that you're just invited into rather than having to create yourself. I think that sort of made it, and maybe the time period in which they came along, they were kind of a metaphor for again, periods of crisis and uncertainty and fear.
Right.
And so, like the Mummy and Frankenstein still became indicative of life itself and conquering life's boogeyman.
Challenge. Okay. All right. Let's see here. There was a time when each generation, I said, had a similar reference frame for a book like Catcher in the Rye, which was
Yeah.
widely read generationally. Have movies taken on the role, giving each generation or sub-generation a movie that they share culturally and kind of express the world in terms of?
Let's try and understand what you're asking. Are you saying have movies like replace novels
Right.
as a
So,
kind of the primary?
right. I noticed that like a certain, when I was an archaeologist, I worked with young people. So I was
Oh,
always
okay, right.
young, they were always younger than me, but they would like have, say, not Reality Bites, but one of those kids movies that they all like one group would have that. Yeah, I saw that when I was in high school, and they would all talk
Right.
about here in common. But then as they got younger, it'd be a different movie, And I was wondering if like,
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, right. Through every period of people's development, they would movies would become well, like music. Like you hear a song from the 1970s, and it evokes memories of who you were going through it. And I think movies they big. And I also think that unfortunately we become a sort of a less literate culture because movies do everything for you. When you're reading a book, you have to create the image yourself in your own mind, and the movies do that for you. So it kind of, in more cynical terms, creates most intellectual laziness. Although, having said that, there are movies that also provoke thought. You know, uh, movies that, if well presented, make us challenge us to re-examine our values and things like that. But I think the movies that I love movies, but I also love reading. I'm not sure how many other people say that. I think people have moved away from literature a little bit
right,
and
and
depend on movies that tell stories for them.
I have to admit, I love audiobooks. I just love
Yeah, well,
driving and
yeah,
listening
I've
to
never
them.
gotten into audiobooks myself. I'm maybe a little fashioned in that regard. Because I insert my own voices.
Uh huh.
I'm reading from written page, and audiobooks kind of takes that away from me.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Let's see.
Yeah.
All right. Um, could you please give a couple of examples of movies or characters that have pushed the social needle in terms of broader cultural understanding? And you already talked about Sidney Poitier, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and
Yeah. Also,
yeah.
like Tom Hanks' character in Philadelphia,
Uh-huh.
as that came along at the time when we were just crossing a threshold of understanding about people, you know, gay people and that whole community,
Right.
and the association of homosexuality with AIDS. There was kind of a public mindset that, oh, it's dangerous because it's going to happen to you, and it humanized. I think it kind of helped us through that, humanized those characters. They not necessarily they don't necessarily conflate. And there are other movies about social issues like that try to present a broader view. Like, well, let me see.
You said the heat of the night, or in the heat of the night earlier, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
another
Oh,
good one.
Brokeback Mountain is a good example
Uh-huh.
in terms of same-sex attraction.
Yeah.
Those it was hard to um, villainize or whatever, or to reject those individuals just because they were of that particular out the mainstream relationship. I
Yeah.
think that when films dramatize, when you have a setting like that off the beaten track, and create strong characters, you know, it helps people identify with them as human beings and what they're going through as human beings, and they're more relatable than as a certain type of person.
Right.
Um,
Humanizes them, I guess.
uh, another one like might be Precious.
Haven't seen that one. Don't know that. I mean, I know what it is, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the main character is the black female who's who's obese, and all the struggles that she goes through around that, and perception of her. She emerges at the end as someone that a complete person, and not just someone that you might react to, first glance. So I think movies, often help with that, and I think there's something about. Well, I mean, there are documentaries, many great documentaries about situations that are very instructive, but I think people come away with I think the fictional movies where there are characters that there's a focus on particular people or characters. I think people derive an emotional education. Those kinds of movies about real social issues, more so than by watching a documentary.
Gives them a little depth, or builds the character a little deeper.
Yeah, right. Because because you can live inside the movie while you're watching it more than you can with a documentary, which is sort of one step removed.
That's interesting. That's an interesting concept because you're the Zen. I was thinking of Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. Are you watching something from inside the car, or are you on the motorcycle with inside of the event?
Right.
Wow. I'm not a film critic, and I never pretended to be one. My podcast role is to remind people of good films from the past that they may have never seen,
Right.
or that they need to see again. So, what do you think the role of podcasters is concerning film? Because there's a lot of film podcasters out there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, um, the whole venue of podcasts, I think, has become more and more popular and more to be a dominant form of communication. People in the busy lives that we lead, people may not have time to sit down and become fully absorbed in uh, film. Whereas a podcast, you can sort of absorb while you're doing other things.
Right.
It can be a strictly audio experience. I think it's plays a significant role because something that you can integrate into other things, and also the live conversation. You feel like you're joining a conversation, having.
Okay.
So
All
I
right.
think it's ultimately a good thing that well, it's another way for another avenue for experience things that are conversations, significant conversations that people are having about significant issues.
All right. Um, let's see. This is chapter 6. As someone reminded me once, it is show business. What do you think the effect of the Sony hack by North Korea over the film The Interview 2014 and the makers of that terrible Red Dawn 2012 changed the
Right.
attackers to North Korean in an attempt to appease the movie market? Is that hurting the quality of film?
I don't know. I'm not sure I have a cogent answer to that question. First of all, I'm not really familiar with the North Korea 2012 hack
Oh, okay.
there, but I, in a broad sense, the politicization of the city is always a kind of a danger that lurks in the background. I mean, well, you go back to like Nazi Germany. I mean, and the female filmmaker name
The
escapes me.
Lenny Ravens
Right.
stuff.
I mean, that was a really potent tool of propaganda, and I like to think that we're a little bit more enlightened from our standpoint today, and less susceptible to that. But there are several ways in which films can supplant little ideas in the back of our mind and maybe move us a certain direction politically. But it's a danger that lurks there because of the fraction of that, the magnetism of film as an experience,
Mm-hmm.
or television for that matter. I think um, we're less vulnerable to that than we might have been, earlier times. But who can say? I can say a lot of this is like way underneath the radar,
Right.
and I think people are always uh, subliminally influenced by things that they experience, and they're not necessarily conscious of.
That makes perfect sense. Um, would you say that traditional Hollywood would be very conservative and it would take a spirited independent to make movies that would push the edge? Kind of like we're back on that culture question. We're pushing
Well,
society.
I think when we talk about traditional Hollywood, when we talk about major studios and the major productions do, I mean, obviously, a lot of the Hollywood film industry is geared towards giving the people what they want, quote unquote. So, entertainments that are not necessarily um, that interested in provoking thought, more like the value of entertainment. But I think that's less the case now than it was earlier. When the industry was still building itself in the 40s, or yeah, I think that mainstream Hollywood movies more predictable in terms of their kinds of values they inculcated. But I think that's very different now, and I think strangely enough, I think the Academy Award has played. But once that became kind of a public thing, when it was out on television,
Uh-huh.
got interested in that because of it. I think as the Oscars kind of reflect the way that the film industry has, because more and more quote unquote independent films that challenge the visual point of view, they got more recognition. So I think there's more of a balance, and I don't think you have to be a low budget indie filmmaker get a decent plus. I think there's that spirit has bled into the movie industry a lot more.
All right. I recently watched Mystery in Mexico, 1948, which was directed by Robert Wise, and the bad guy pointed the gun directly at the screen and fired several times. I
Oh yeah,
immediately realized this was an homage to the Great Train Robbery,
of
1903.
course, yeah.
Do you think that understanding like film history like that and what's going on, the events depicted, makes it a more enjoyable experience for the
Oh sure.
viewer?
I, anytime anytime filmmakers do something that out of the ordinary, or that people are not normally accustomed to, that the shock value of that by itself, I think, uh, kind of puts us in the reality. Something well, like I say, when the gun pointed directly at you, it makes it an immediate experience, and it wipes away the intellectual distance.
Right.
And it sucks you right in. And I think that's when films do that, when films use little gimmicks like that, it makes them more effective as not just the means of storytelling, but a conversation audience. I mean, you give the audience member the onlooker part of the story, because like liminally they feel like they're under the immediate threat. So like kind of living in the story more and not able to distance from it. Right.
Oh, fantastic. We talked about this a little bit, I think, when we were emailing. My archaeology friends say humans are predisposed for at least the last 750,000 years to sit in the dark and stare at fires. At this fire, they're told tales are told, cultural norms are expressed, and fears are faced, like we were talking about with the Marx movies.
Yeah.
You think film has replaced the fire for modern humans? Does the filmmaker have a great responsibility with how they use their medium? Tapping into this.
Well, there's I guess there are two elements to that. First of all, I firmly believe that film has become the main venue for modern story. I think that the gathered around the fire kind of thing, that was where that was a community event. Storytelling was a community event in a lot of ways that passed on values and sort of reinforced the values of the community there. And I think film does that now on a modern sense. I think of a good example of I'm trying to think of films that tell a very strong story and telling it passionately that people can translate to their daily lives.
Okay.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but
yeah.
there have been like dramas kind of shaken the foundation.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a movie where I came out and and just went, "Oh, that was deep," but I can't pull one out. I know it's happened.
Yeah. I mean, they're if you give it enough thought, there's
I think
a whole
maybe
string of movies like that throughout history that sort of solidified the.
Go ahead, please. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. No, all I have to say about it.
All right, I was thinking maybe like you said a while ago, Lawrence of Arabia, and that's maybe one of those kind of movies you come out of.
Yeah.
And,
or Citizen Kane, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that makes Kane such a weird film, it kind of allow people to look into the world of world journalism, or how people can feed life and have that and have their soul supported by that.
Right.
I think that it was kind of a metaphor for a lot of things that capitalistic lives.
Okay.
And where that can
Lead too far. The film industry has tried for more than a century to keep customers returning with 3D, sense around,
right,
moving chairs, smell, mist, water.
right.
Do you think the film industry will be able to recover after the virus here, and or will they need something new? And I just say, I personally looking for the return of the drive-in theater.
Yeah,
One car.
um, I'd like to see the drive-in return for a lot of reasons. But I don't think that's going to be the means that film or that movies are going to move us forward in terms of that experience. I think it's hard to say. I think it'll take a while, but I don't think that the experience of going to a theater and enjoying a movie experience within that environment um, is going to go away. I think it'll gradually turn, and I think that like widescreen entertainment,
Mhm.
uh, where you can be completely enveloped, and movies that lend themselves to that, like craving did. I think that's something that's a big draw for people, and I think it's uh, theatrical film viewing is still superior to television in that way. I mean, although it's kind of a television can accomplish the same thing in the more intimate setting, which has its advantages. But there's something about sitting in a seat in a theater in front of like a wall-size screen that uh, is different, and I think it captures the audience in a more way. You kind of forget about your environment around you, and you're totally in the moment. So I'm hoping that trend will continue,
Yeah.
or will going out to the movies. I think will eventually revive, uh, and I think it may even be. I think people may even be more attracted to it because the whole idea of getting out of the house. Just having the mobility and having able to congregate
Right.
like that. All that will be something that will push that.
Okay.
That'd be nice to get away from
Yeah.
lockdowns.
It's been going on too long,
Yeah. It's hard so long that it's hard to remember a time when we weren't.
Yeah.
You can't. It's hard to kind of grasp onto what that experience was like. And
I
I think
didn't.
people are going to be just anything to get away from right now, because I think we're all feeling a sense of loss of the interaction with other people.
Mhm.
Lockdown thing, on at the wall trying to get out.
Right. Soon we hope. All right. Let's see here. Let's see. I've often wondered, as we spoke about earlier, if our values and norms will be an agreed upon narrative and that does not necessarily reflect actual events. I watched Patton just 1970 last week and
Right,
realized it's a
right.
total propaganda piece. It's a great movie. I love
Oh yeah,
George C.
oh yeah,
Scott, but it was the model of the American warrior we wanted. That's who we wanted our
yes, oh
leaders
yeah,
to be.
absolutely. Right.
And so I also think that Tarantino films that merge historical events with an alternate universe, I was thinking about them. And again, could this have a harmful effect on poorly educated masses of people? With that, we talked about it a little bit already, so it's
Well,
kind
I
of
don't know. That's an interesting thought. I think Tarantino is kind of a unique case. His movies are so stylized that I would like to think that it's people going to substitute that for reality. But it's I think he has a sort of a quirky twist to reality that almost brings out real reality even more. You know, it's like satires emphasize certain parts of they're going to bring to our attention some of the absurdities of life as it is. And I hope that people wouldn't necessarily so absorb that they can't separate that out from real life experience. I think Tarantino's one of his aims as a filmmaker is to sort of pointedly question our reality so that we can look at it with fresh eyes.
All right. Well, let's see. And what have I forgotten to ask you in this talk?
You got me there.
All right. Well,
I mean, it's fun just what we've been talking about. Okay. But I don't claim to have any superior knowledge in any particular. I mean, like I say, I don't consider myself an expert. I just think that I've kind of gone into the world of film as an alternate reality me from follow existence. You know, because there are endless possibilities. And I'm a big fan of fantasy films. I think one of the things that got me so interested in and like writing film reviews and so what got me started in that was in watching the awards venue and noting that films that are fantasy based often get short shrift in terms of their value of theme and things like that, because kind of a sort of a haughtiness on the part of Hollywood type that, well, those are just entertainment films. They don't carry any value beyond that. So I try to rebel against that in a sense by setting my own point, or at least kind of mapping it out for myself. And I think that also train of thought, but fantasy films also have a great deal of value and equal great dramatic film. So,
okay.
Presenting poignant themes and being thoughtful. I kind of wish that I had more means of exposure to my film reviews, because I like writing reviews of films, and I'd like to have them to have broad exposure, but I don't know how to go about that. I was thinking about creating another book that would just be reviews of films, and I purposely included all my film reviews,
right? See
if what kind of reaction I would get from that society, the society of film critics, you know.
Okay.
But I guess I'm looking for some sort of validation that what I get out of films and what I'm able to articulate, you know, has some validation or validity or some meaning. Well, I would love to be more involved talking to people about that, just talking movie, all things would draw from particular. Because I think it's a very subjective individual experience, and you can learn a lot from what another person speaks from a movie as, right, as distinct from your own. And that would be something that I would never tire of, is having those kinds of conversations.
Well, where can people get your book, and where can they find you on social media?
Well, I don't really live in the social media world too much. Okay. All I have is my email. And as far as the book, I mean, it's available online through Barnes and Noble and Amazon, and really in other venues. Outskirts Press, my publisher,
Mm-hmm.
they have a marketing and media arm, and there's a woman that is sort of my marketing representative, and she's well, the very fact that we're talking now is
Right.
through her efforts of connecting me with those kinds of sources. So, but like I say, I know that if you go to Barnes Noble's site or Amazon site, it's readily available there.
Okay. Well, I'll put some
Also,
links
others that I
in.
can't even remember. But,
Yeah, I'll put some links in the podcast when it goes live. So,
oh, thank you. Yeah,
yeah, no,
thank you.
no problem. And well, Dan, it was really great talking to you. I enjoyed reading your book.
Likewise.
Appreciate you sending me that copy, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
All right. Likewise.